Good afternoon. So we're going to cover chapter 3 on physical changes across adulthood. So in this lecture, we're going to explore inspiring questions. And one question is, why do some individuals defy the conventional boundaries of age, whereas some may experience noticeable physical and cognitive decline? So one interesting story is of Dara Torres. At 41 years old, they achieved remarkable feat of becoming the oldest woman to win an Olympic medal in swimming. Another case is Tom Brady, whose career defied expectations as he led two different NFL teams to the Super Bowl victories after turning 40. And so many people question, well, what is this secret that allows people to maintain their competitive edge and defy the aging process? And why do some people decline physically and cognitively as they age? And so as we think about these questions, let us draw inspiration from their stories and strive to understand the key to their enduring success. There are some biological theories of aging that we're going to cover in this lecture. One is an intriguing theory about aging, and it is metabolic theories. These suggest that organisms have a finite amount of energy to expend throughout their lifetime. The core idea here is that the rate at which an organism's metabolism operates is linked to its lifespan. There is an interesting notion that reducing caloric intake might extend longevity. However, research involving non-human primates reveals that simply cutting calories doesn't always lead to a longer life. It turns out that our circadian rhythms, which is our natural sleep-wake cycle, play a role in this equation. When and how we eat and what we consume significantly impact whether our caloric restriction actually leads to an extended lifespan. So in addition, the extreme reductions in caloric intake might influence longevity, often come at the cost of our quality of life. So quality of life on extremely restricted diets is a concern. And so this complex interaction between metabolism, caloric intake, and our circadian rhythms highlights the multifaceted nature of aging and longevity. Cellular theories give another interesting perspective on aging. And these theories suggest that the aging process is rooted at the cellular level. So according to this view, there is a finite number of times that a cell can divide. And this limitation on cell division could be a key factor in determining the lifespan of complex organisms. In research settings, cells can only undergo a fixed number of divisions before they cease to function. There is an upper limit known as the Hayflick limit, and it varies depending on the age of the donor organism. Evidence points to telomeres, which are the protective caps at the ends of chromosomes. And they play a role in this process, and they help manage the cell's response to stress and growth stimuli. And they typically shorten with each cell division. Healthy telomeres are essential for regulating cell division and reproduction. There is an enzyme also called telomerase, which is needed to fully replicate these telomeres during cell division. However, telomerase is usually absent in somatic cells. So as a result, with each division, telomeres become progressively shorter. And eventually chromosomes become unstable and they can no longer replicate effectively once telomeres reach a critical length. So understanding this cellular mechanism offers valuable insights into the nature of aging and the limitations posed on our cells. Another theory, another part of a cellular theory is oxidative stress. So the theory suggests that aging can also result from an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in our body. Free radicals are highly reactive molecules that are produced as a byproduct of normal metabolic process. They have a tendency to interact with other molecules, and on the other hand, antioxidants are molecules that neutralize free radicals. When free radicals outnumber antioxidants available to control them, they can inflict damage on our DNA and proteins. This process of oxidative stress can contribute to a wide range of diseases over time, including cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's disease. And so understanding the oxidative stress process provides valuable insight into how imbalances at the cellular and molecular level can influence the aging process. A third cellular theory is based on a process called cross-linking, and this is where certain proteins in human cells interact randomly and produce molecules linked in such a way to make the body stiffer. So the proteins are known as collagen. They make up 1/3 of protein in the body, and they are typically found in soft body tissue, and they act a lot like reinforcing pods in concrete. And so the more cross links there are, the stiffer the tissue gets. And so as we age, the number of cross links increases, which explain why the heart and arteries may become stiffer with age. There is some scientific data that demonstrate cross-linking broadly interferes with body-wide processes enough to be a basic cause of systemic aging. A fourth cellular theory related to aging centers on structures known as mitochondria. Mitochondria are the powerhouses of our cells, and they're responsible for generating the chemical energy we need to drive vital biochemical reactions. As we age, changes in our mitochondria have been linked to various issues, including difficulties with movement and cognitive functions. And these changes have also been associated with conditions such as dementia, depression, and other mental disorders. It is believed that mitochondrial dysfunction may contribute to broader cellular problems and eventually lead to cell death. The importance of cellular processes and understanding aging is supported by research on how life trauma, post-traumatic stress, and discrimination can impact DNA. Studies have shown that these factors affect our biological age, which is often measured through DNA methylation. DNA methylation is a complex chemical process that modifies how DNA functions, particularly in protein production. Even though the DNA structure itself remains unchanged, disruptions in protein manufacturing occur due to alterations in methylation. Scientists can assess biological age by measuring the extent of DNA methylation, which is influenced by a range of factors, including our life experiences and environmental conditions. Another interesting perspective of aging deals with the theory of genetic programming. And so these theories posit that aging is programmed into our genetic code. So even when a cell death appears random, researchers believe that cell death could be a part of a master genetic program that underlies the aging process. Programmed cell death appears to be a function of physiological processes. the innate ability of cells to self-destruct, and the ability of dying cells to trigger key processes in other cells. And so all of these are thought to be influenced by external environmental factors. However, it is not clear as to how cells become activated to self-destruct. But we do know that there are many pathologies, such as changes in the brain cells, Alzheimer's disease, memory loss, and personality changes that indicate that aging is programmed into our genes. So there are several implications of biological, psychological, sociocultural, and life cycle forces. So while researchers have not yet developed a single unified theory to explain the entirety of aging, our understanding is becoming more clear. And so we're now recognizing that genetics can play a significant role, and that errors in cellular replication can happen. And this is when cells produce incorrect copies of themselves, which can have long-term implications for health and aging. As we move through this chapter, we will examine various body systems and their health-related processes, and we will begin to see how these biological forces interact with psychological, sociocultural, and life cycle factors. And so pay close attention to how changes in body systems and the onset of disease is influenced by these broader factors. And so the takeaway from these dynamic interactions is pretty clear. Diagnosing and treating health concerns requires a comprehensive approach. It's not sufficient to assess physical functioning to determine a person's overall health. It's a thorough evaluation has to be done, which should include psychological and sociocultural aspects, which is ensuring a more holistic view of a person's well-being and functioning. And so there are three general approaches to slowing or reversing the aging process. And one is to perhaps delay the chronic illnesses of old age by reducing risk factors. There is some research showing that cognitive training can also reduce the onset of Alzheimer's disease and reduce the risk. Cognitive training involves engaging in structured activities that are aimed at enhancing a person's memory, reasoning, and processing speed. Research, which included advanced cognitive training for independent and vital elderly clinical trials, indicated that training can positively impact cognitive performance. And this was known as the ACTIVE trial, which was a substantial clinical study. And it did generate results that showed cognitive training significantly improves the abilities of healthy older adults ages 65 and over. In addition to that, managing high blood pressure can also play a crucial role in overall brain health. And so we have found that controlling a person's high blood pressure can lower the risk of heart disease and stroke, and it may also help prevent or delay Alzheimer's disease. High blood pressure, especially during midlife, is a recognized risk factor for cognitive decline in later years. There was a SPRINT MIND trial, which in short that's the abbreviated term, but it is known as the Systolic Blood Pressure Intervention Trial. This study examined the effects of lowering blood pressure in over 8,000 older adults that were aged 50 and over, and they were at a high risk for cardiovascular disease, and the results found that reducing systolic blood pressure to below 120 compared to the standard 140 reading significantly decreased the risk of mild cognitive impairment. Additionally, brain scans indicated that this intensive blood pressure management lowered and slowed the development of white matter lesions, which are abnormal brain changes associated with dementia. And so one approach to slowing or reversing aging process is, of course, to find the risk factors of aging and reduce them. By reducing them, we can delay chronic illnesses of old age. Other factors are to slow fundamental processes of aging to increase the lifespan, and arrest or reverse aging by removing damage caused by metabolic processes. Several changes in our skin happen, so some of these are getting age spots, moles, pigment-containing cells tend to decrease, varicose veins can develop, skin wrinkling. And so one common question is, why does our skin wrinkle as we age? There's typically a 4-step process that occurs when it comes to the wrinkling of skin. First, the outer layer of our skin thins out due to cell loss, which makes it more delicate. Second, our collagen fibers within our connective tissue lose their flexibility, which can reduce the skin's ability to bounce back after being pinched. Third, our elastin fibers in the middle layer of the skin lose their effectiveness in maintaining our skin's stretched appearance, which can lead to sagging. And finally, the underlying layer of fat, which provides padding and smooths out the skin's contours, diminishes over time. Interestingly, the rate at which our skin ages is largely influenced by our behaviors. 2 major environmental factors that can contribute to wrinkling are 1, exposure to ultraviolet rays from the sun, which deteriorate the skin's connective tissue, and 2, smoking, which impairs blood flow to the skin, particularly around the lips. Additionally, a diet that's low in fresh fruits and vegetables, excessive alcohol consumption, and habits such as sweating and making repetitive facial expressions can also exacerbate our formation of wrinkles. So fortunately, there are several proactive measures that we can take to safeguard our skin as we age. These include protecting ourselves from sun exposure, using moisturizer daily, and refraining from smoking and minimizing repetitive facial movements. As people age, both men and women will inevitably experience gradual thinning and graying of their hair. The pace at which this occurs can vary widely among individuals. Hair loss is primarily caused by deterioration of the germ centers responsible for producing hair follicles. Interestingly, men retain their facial hair as they age, and it's not uncommon to see balding men with full bushy beards. Additionally, men may develop thicker eyebrows and increased hair growth inside the ears. In contrast, women may notice the growth of facial hair, particularly on the chin, which is often linked to hormonal changes associated with menopause. Graying hair is common for most people as they age. The timing of this change can vary greatly. Graying occurs due to the cessation of pigment production in the hair follicles. Research indicates that both genetic factors and lifestyle choices can influence the onset of graying, especially when it happens prematurely. Cultural practices, which can sometimes be gender specific, also play a role in whether individuals choose to embrace their gray hair or color it. As we age, our voices naturally change in several ways. So you might notice older adults have a lower pitch, more breathlessness, a bit of trembling, slower and less clear speech, and a decrease in volume. Research has shown that women often experience more noticeable changes in their voice as they get older, including variations in pitch and volume and increased glottal noise. which are those little cracks or extra sounds in the voice. These changes are largely due to alterations in the voice box, the respiratory system, and the muscles that control how we speak. If you've spent a lot of time with older people like your grandparents, you've also probably noticed that their bodies change as they get older. Two noticeable changes are losing height and experiencing weight fluctuations. There's also changes in body build, so there's differences in the way bodies look over time. As people age, they generally become shorter, and this typically starts at around age 40, with height decreasing by about 1 centimeter every decade. After age 70, this loss can speed up, leading to a total height reduction of 2.5 to 7.5 centimeters. This height loss is usually due to changes in the spine, such as the loss of bone strength and changes in the discs between the vertebrae. More importantly, losing more than 3 centimeters in height can be linked to a higher risk of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases. In addition to height, weight changes are common. So many people gain weight from their 20s to their 50s and then lose weight as they get older. Weight gain often results from reduced exercise and not adjusting food intake to match lower calorie needs. This weight gain is usually noticeable when clothes become tighter. So for men, the weight tends to accumulate around the abdomen, while women often gain weight around the hips. In later life, people typically lose muscle and bone, which can lead to overall weight loss. Research shows that maintaining a normal weight at age 65 is associated with a longer life expectancy and fewer disabilities. And on the other hand, significant weight loss as we age can increase the risk of cognitive issues, including mild cognitive impairment and Alzheimer's disease. As we grow older, we naturally lose muscle tissue. Up to around 70 years of age, this muscle loss does not impact our strength too much. Typically, we lose about 20% of our muscle mass. However, after we reach age 70, this loss speeds up. So by age 80, many people have lost around 40% of their strength, especially in their legs, compared to their arms and hands. The loss of muscle strength, particularly in the lower body, can affect our balance. So we're more likely to experience issues with balance and increase our risk of falls as our lower body strength diminishes. Wearing high heels frequently throughout life can worsen these balance problems because they alter our posture and center of gravity. We also experience changes in bone. So you might have seen some ads promoting products for bone health. As we age, we naturally lose bone mass, and this process starts in our late 30s. It speeds up in our 50s and slows down in our 70s. We typically reach peak bone mass by the age 18, and those are really for people assigned female at birth. For those assigned male at birth, it's typically 20 years of age. So a little bit of difference in peak bone mass. Genetics do play a big role in determining our bone mass, and environmental factors typically affect us before puberty. Women in particular face a higher risk of bone loss, especially after menopause due to decreased estrogen levels. Research shows that people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds experience bone loss differently. So non-Hispanic Black individuals often have higher bone density and a lower risk of bone diseases compared to other ethnicities. As we age, bones become more hollow, making them more prone to fractures. These fractures can be severe and harder to heal in older adults. And so, in conclusion, while aging brings challenges to our muscle and bone health, it's important that we stay active and engaged in exercises, and this can make a huge difference in preventing bone loss and osteoporosis. Osteoporosis is a major cause of broken bones in older women and can also affect people in their 50s, but it is more common in women than men, and it is influenced by low bone mass, calcium and vitamin D deficiencies, and reduced estrogen levels. So to help prevent osteoporosis, it's recommended to get vitamin D and calcium. Calcium supplements can slow down the bone loss, especially if women start supplementing before menopause. Also, it's important to consume calcium-rich foods like milk and leafy greens. And so I have a chart here that kind of shows you how many milligrams daily adult females and adult males should be taking. If you see this figure here, vitamin D, it's typically for adult females age 50 and younger, between 400 and 800 units. And then for calcium, about 1,000 units per day. I'm sorry, 1,000 milligrams per day for calcium for adult females ages 50 and younger. And then after age 50, you typically want to increase it to 1,200 milligrams daily. For adult males, after age 70, the calcium intake should be increased also to 1,200 milligrams daily. And then for vitamin D, adult males should be taking between 400 to 800 units daily of vitamin D after age 50 and younger. And then after age 50, 800 to 1,000 daily. In addition to osteoporosis, many older adults experience joint pain due to cartilage deterioration that begins in their 20s. This can lead to two main types of arthritis. One is osteoarthritis, which is caused by wear and tear on the joints. It's often noticed in the late middle age or older, and it affects joints like the hands, hips, and knees. It can cause pain that worsens with use, but has minimal inflammation. Managing osteoarthritis involves steroids, anti-inflammatory drugs, and a combination of health behaviors, which are exercise, diet, and home remedies. Rheumatoid arthritis is a more aggressive condition that causes pain and inflammation in the joints and often starts with morning stiffness in the fingers, wrists, and ankles on both sides of the body. Both types of arthritis require different management strategies, but addressing joint health early can help mitigate symptoms and improve quality of life. Changes in appearance and mobility can have some psychological implications for people. So, for example, the appearance of wrinkles and gray hair can have effects on a person's self-concept. There are some gender differences. So with women especially, they tend to report higher levels of social pressure to engage in compensating for these changes in order to remain visible in society. And so there's stereotypes that describe aging women. And so because the US typically likes to place high value on looking young, middle-aged and older adults, such as women, may be stereotypically regarded as inferior on a number of dimensions, including intellectual ability, simply because they do not conform to an unrealistic image of beauty. In contrast, stereotypes describe aging men with some gray hair as distinguished, more experienced, and more knowledgeable than their younger counterparts. And at the same time, there is pressure on men to look and act athletic. So they also do feel some societal pressure to conform. However, there's more pressure for women than for men. Given the social stereotypes, many people engage in various behaviors to compensate for these changes. And so some age-related changes in facial appearance can be disguised with cosmetics. So hair dyes can restore color. Some people get surgical procedures such as facelifts, or they do Botox. They can also do tummy tucks, which can tighten sagging and wrinkled skin. Plastic surgery can hide and delay the inevitable, but at some point, everyone does take on a distinctly old appearance. Losses in strength and endurance in old age can have the same psychological effects as changes in appearance. And so these changes can be interpreted by the person that they are not as capable of adapting effectively to the environment. A loss of muscle coordination can prove to be embarrassing and stressful in social situations when others are practicing ageist attitudes and behaviors. As we age, our eyes undergo two major structural changes. First, the amount of light passing through our eyes decrease, and it makes it harder to see clearly up close, and this condition is known as presbyopia. As a result, many people need more light for tasks, such as reading or require reading glasses. Additionally, it takes longer for older eyes to shift focus from near to far, which can be particularly problematic for driving. Drivers must frequently adjust their focus between the dashboard, other vehicles, and road signs, and slower refocusing can lead to missed information. Apart from these normal age-related changes, some people experience specific eye diseases due to abnormal structural changes. Cataracts disease, which cloudy spots on the lens of the eye, reduces the amount of light that reaches the retina. Cataracts are typically treated with surgery to remove the cloudy lens and replace it with a clear one. Another condition is glaucoma, where fluid in the eye doesn't drain properly and it causes high pressure that can damage the eye and lead to vision loss. Glaucoma, which is common in middle and later life, is often managed with eye drops. Surgery may also be needed to improve fluid drainage in some cases. As we get older, vision problems tend to affect our emotions and personality traits, so there are psychological effects of visual impairment. Older adults with visual impairments are often more prone to depression because they may feel less socially connected and have fewer opportunities for enjoyable activities. So for example, older adults may read less or watch TV or not drive a car. And so to help, it's beneficial to create more positive experiences that can accommodate their vision changes. Additionally, poor vision increases the risk of falling because it can be harder to see obstacles or judge distances. And certain common vision changes such as presbyopia and cataracts can be fixed with glasses, contacts, or laser surgery. And so corrective actions can be necessary. However, conditions such as dry macular degeneration are harder to treat, so adapting to these untreatable changes can be challenging, and they can affect vision and disrupt established routines, and so it may take time to adjust to new challenges and modify daily habits accordingly, and so it's important to take corrective environmental changes in order to treat visual impairment. In older adults, hearing problems often arise from a mixture of aging and noise exposure. The most common issue is reduced sensitivity to high-pitched sounds, known as presbycusis. This condition tends to start earlier and be more severe for high-pitched sounds compared to low-pitched sounds. By our 70s, half of older adults experience presbycusis. Men generally experience more hearing loss than women, likely due to more exposure to loud environments. Hearing loss usually begins gradually and speeds up in the 40s. Presbycusis involves four main changes in the inner ear: sensory, which is damage to the receptor cells in the ear; neural, which is loss of neurons in the auditory pathway in the brain; metabolic, which is reduced nutrient supply to receptor cells; and mechanical, which is the stiffening and damage to the structures that help with sound vibration. Understanding which type of presbycusis someone has is important because it affects treatment and hearing abilities differently. Sensory loss has minimal impact on other hearing functions, while neural loss makes it hard to understand speech. Metabolic loss affects hearing at all pitches severely, and mechanical loss affects all pitches, but especially high ones. Hearing loss can significantly impact a person's quality of life and affect their social interactions. It can also lead to emotional issues such as depression and social isolation. Research studies have shown that people with hearing loss are more likely to experience these problems, and this is a global issue. So, for example, those with significant hearing loss are about 40% more likely to have reduced social activity. However, hearing loss itself doesn't directly cause social or emotional issues. It's the associated challenges that do. As we age, our somatosensory system and our balance change. The somatosensory system encompasses our ability to consciously perceive touch, pressure, pain, temperature, body position, movement, and vibration from our muscles, joints, and skin. This system integrates signals from all of these sources to help us perform complex tasks such as maintaining our balance. And touch receptors are not evenly distributed across the body. So they're mostly concentrated in the lips, tongue, and fingertips. The skin also contains various types of receptors that allow us to detect different types of stimuli. And so over time, our sensitivities change as we get older. For example, we may experience pain sensitivity, and so chronic pain affects about 50% of older adults and over 80% of those in long-term care facilities. Older adults are more pain sensitive, they're more prone to persistent pain, and pain medications often work less effectively for them. Falls are also common in older adults, with about 1 in 4 people over 65 falling each year. Older adults frequently experience dizziness and vertigo. Dizziness is a vague feeling of unsteadiness, and vertigo is a sensation of spinning. While age-related changes in the vestibular system contribute to these issues, they don't fully explain the increase in dizziness and vertigo. Older adults also take longer to process sensory information to maintain posture. Additionally, dizziness can be caused by certain medications and health conditions. Balance training is a widely used method to prevent falls and is effective even when done at home. Virtual reality can also be used for balance training, and one of the most well-established exercise programs for improving balance is based on Tai Chi, which has a long history of success. Taste and smell are also affected. So there is an old saying, too old to cut the mustard, comes from when people made mustard at home by mixing ground mustard seeds with the right amount of vinegar to get the perfect flavor. And if too much vinegar was added, the mustard tasted awful, and so getting the balance just right was crucial. Many people found that older family members often added too much vinegar, and this saying reflects the belief that our taste abilities change with age, though we have limited data on this. There is a greater loss in sour and bitter tastes as we get older. And so our ability to detect different tastes does gradually decline. And so older adults may add more salt or sugar to foods and drinks to match the flavors that they remember. Food preferences can also shift due to social and psychological factors, making it hard to pinpoint age-related changes precisely. Research shows that a decrease in taste sensitivity is not due to reduction in the number of taste buds. The ability to taste sour and bitter flavors seems to change, but the exact reason for this are not fully understood because medications and chronic illnesses can affect that too. As for smell, it generally stays strong until our 60s when it begins to decline. This can vary widely among individuals and different types of odors. Some loss of smell is normal, but it is more pronounced in neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. A loss of smell is also a known symptom of COVID-19 and is used to help diagnose these and other conditions. Decreased smell ability can impact personal safety, such as detecting smoke or gas leaks, and affects our enjoyment of food and other experiences. It can also make it harder to remember past experiences that are tied to specific smells, such as the scent of baking cookies, which means our sense of the past might suffer as well. There's also age-related changes in the cardiovascular system. Two major changes affect our cardiovascular system. So first, fat deposits will start to accumulate around the heart, forming a continuous layer by the late 40s and early 50s. Second, healthy heart muscle tissue is replaced by connective tissue, which makes the heart muscle and valves thicker and stiffer. This reduces the amount of muscle available to pump blood, meaning the remaining muscle has to work harder. So for example, the heart's pumping capacity drops from about 5 liters per minute at age 20 to around 3.5 liters per minute by age 70. Another change is that the heart cannot beat as quickly during physical stress as it did in youth. So over time, there's a pigment called lipofuscin, which comes from oxidized proteins and accumulates in the heart muscle. This pigment indicates age, but it doesn't cause heart disease. The circulatory system also undergoes important changes, and this is due to a buildup of calcium and the replacement of elastic fibers with less flexible ones. Together, these changes reduce the heart's ability to handle physical exertion, especially aerobic activities. So by age 65, a person who doesn't exercise regularly will see a 60 to 70% drop in their aerobic capacity. This is compared to their younger years. So staying physically active can lessen this decline. This decreased aerobic capacity really means that older adults who aren't in good shape are more likely to experience heart attacks during moderate activities. Moderate would be shoveling snow or mowing the lawn. In the United States, almost half of adults over age 20 have some form of cardiovascular disease. And this risk goes up with age across all groups. Cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death from non-accidental causes in the US and many other countries. As people age, the risk of heart disease increases significantly, and men are more likely to suffer from coronary heart disease, while women are more likely to have strokes. For women, including those on hormone treatments before menopause, the risk is lower compared to men. However, after menopause, the risk for women rises and tends to match that of men after the age of 75. Overall, cardiovascular disease accounts for about 1 in 3 deaths in the US. In terms of racial and ethnic differences in cardiovascular disease, Black individuals, Native Americans, and Native Hawaiians have the highest rates of high blood pressure, which is also known as hypertension. Asian Americans have the lowest rates, however, of heart disease. And these differences are due partially to genetics, but they're also influenced by sociocultural factors, including disparities in healthcare, access to healthcare, and lifestyle. On a positive note, cardiovascular disease rates in the US have been falling since the 1980s, especially among men. And this improvement is partly due to fewer people smoking and better nutrition. However, these declines could be misleading because some risk factors are actually rising. So for example, about 40% of adults over 40 in the US are classified as obese, and the rates for diabetes are also increasing. And both diabetes and obesity are both risk factors for cardiovascular disease. Now, there are several types of cardiovascular disease to be aware of. One is congestive heart failure. And this happens when the heart cannot pump effectively, which leads to an enlarged heart, increased pressure in the veins, and swelling in the body. Heart attack, which is a myocardial infarction, and this happens when blood flow to the heart is blocked or reduced and leads to severe symptoms such as chest pain, nausea, weakness, and sweating. Heart attacks are more dangerous for older adults, and symptoms in women might include unusual fatigue and pain in the neck, jaw, or back. Then there's another type of heart disease called angina pectoris, and this occurs when the heart does not get enough oxygen, causing chest pain that might feel like pressure or burning. And this pain usually happens with exertion and eases with rest. Common treatments include nitroglycerin or surgery if needed. Atherosclerosis is an age-related heart condition where fat builds up and hardens on the walls of arteries, making them stiff and narrow. This buildup starts early in life and continues as we age. Some fat in the arteries is normal, but too much can come from poor diet, smoking, and other lifestyle factors. When atherosclerosis becomes severe enough, it can affect the blood vessels that supply the brain. This can lead to a condition called cerebrovascular disease, where brain cells don't get enough nutrients and start to malfunction and die. If blood flow to part of the brain is completely blocked, it can cause a stroke, also known as a cerebrovascular accident. In the US, someone dies from a stroke every 4 minutes, making it a very common cardiovascular issue. Strokes can happen because of clots blocking the blood flow or because a blood vessel in the brain bursts. An age-related respiratory illness is known as chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, also known as COPD. COPD is a major and debilitating respiratory issue for older adults. It includes conditions such as chronic bronchitis and emphysema, and is the third leading cause of disease-related death in the US. Over 16 million people have been diagnosed with COPD, but many more have it without knowing. Women are more affected by it than men, partly because women's lungs are smaller and more prone to damage from smoking and pollutants. Smoking is a main cause of COPD, but secondhand smoke, air pollution, and exposure to industrial dust and chemicals can lead to it as well. Emphysema is a severe type of COPD that destroys the air sacs in the lungs and make it hard to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide. And this damage creates holes in the lungs and causes bronchial tubes to collapse and prevent full lung emptying. Chronic bronchitis is another form of COPD, and it's more common in people over the age of 45. It has an increased risk in older adulthood for those that are exposed to dust, fumes, and pollution. Treatment typically involves medications to open the bronchial passages and changes in work environment. Asthma is a common respiratory condition which is also treated with similar medications. It is increasing in prevalence due to e-cigarettes and vaping. Vaping can harm the lungs and can also lead to COPD, according to research. Early diagnosis and treatment of COPD are crucial, but many people don't get diagnosed or treated due to limited access to healthcare. The most important step for people that smoke is to quit, and in some cases, supplemental oxygen or specific medications can help. However, the damage from COPD is permanent and irreversible. As we move into middle age, our reproductive systems go through significant changes that impact sexual activity and childbearing. These changes are especially noticeable for women and transgender men who have not had gender-affirming treatments. For biological females, there is a transition period which is known as the climacteric. It's the transition from reproductive to non-reproductive years. And menopause and premenopause are key milestones in this transition. Premenopause often starts in the 40s and can last several years, while menopause is usually starts around age 51 in the United States. and it occurs when menstruation has stopped for 12 consecutive months. So it's the point at which the menstruation stops and is officially determined after periods have stopped for 12 consecutive months. Usually there's a loss in estrogen and progesterone levels, changes in the reproductive organs, and changes in sexual functioning. And decreases in these hormones lead to a range of physical and psychological symptoms. So for example, these include hot flashes, night sweats, sleep issues, mood swings, and vaginal dryness. The decline in estrogen has health implications. It can increase the risk of several conditions, including osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, weight gain, and memory issues. Research has shown, though, that these cognitive issues, they're typically referred to as brain fog. They typically improve within a year or so after menopause. To manage the symptoms and associated health risks, menopausal hormone therapy is often recommended. This involves giving low doses of estrogen, sometimes combined with progestin. And despite the mixed findings over the years, major health organizations do agree that this hormone therapy can be effective in easing menopausal symptoms. So middle age brings about these crucial changes in the reproductive system. And while these changes can present challenges, there are ways to manage and adapt to them effectively. Biological males also experience a gradual decline in their reproductive system in terms of age-related changes. So they typically have a decline in their testosterone levels and a decrease in sperm production. So usually it's 30% loss between age 30 and 60. By age 80, sperm fertility is typically about half of what it was at age 25. Many scientists believe that this may be linked to the rise of endocrine disruptors, which are chemicals that interfere with the body's hormones. However, further research is needed to fully understand this issue. As men age, their prostate gland often enlarges and becomes stiffer, which can obstruct the urinary tract and cause difficulties urinating. Prostate cancer also becomes a significant risk during middle age, and annual screenings are usually recommended for men over 50. In terms of sexual performance, older men may need more time and stimulation to achieve an erection and orgasm. They may have a reduced desire to ejaculate and experience a longer recovery period after ejaculation, during which an erection is not possible. Overall, fulfilling a sex life for older men relies heavily on having a consensual and willing partner, and practicing safe sex remains crucial to prevent sexually transmitted diseases. So we'll also talk about how aging affects our ability to regulate body temperature and sleep. So we all have an autonomic nervous system, which controls functions such as body temperature. It also controls our stress and reaction responses, such as our fight or flight system. With body temperature, it does become less efficient in older adults. So this means that older adults often don't realize when they're too cold or too hot. As we age, our body systems that help regulate our body temperature don't work as well. Although some declines can be improved with physical fitness, changes in skin and metabolism are largely unavoidable. Additionally, older adults have a slower response to cold, meaning they take longer to warm up when their body temperature drops. They also sweat less, particularly in their lower body, making it harder for them to cool down when it's hot. This puts them at a higher risk for heat-related illnesses such as a heat stroke and cold-related conditions such as hypothermia. And so elderly are more susceptible to hypothermia and hyperthermia. When it comes to sleep complaints are pretty common. Older adults often take longer to fall asleep, wake up more during the night, and have more fragmented sleep patterns compared to younger people. Circadian rhythms, which are our natural sleep-wake cycles, also shift with age, and this can result in more daytime napping and shorter nighttime sleep. Older adults also have other issues such as sleep apnea, leg jerks, heartburn, frequent urination, and depression. And all of these can further disrupt their sleep cycle. To improve sleep, older adults often try various strategies such as taking daytime naps. Research shows that older adults who nap, especially those over 80, might be more physically active and score higher on measures of successful aging. However, many also use sleeping pills, which can be risky and are not always effective. More effective solutions include increasing physical activity, cutting back on caffeine, avoiding naps during the day, and ensuring a quiet, dark sleeping environment. Since regulating body temperature relies on multiple systems in the body and many age-related changes are unavoidable, it's really important to focus on systems that can be improved with intervention. And so by keeping these systems in the best possible condition, we can help mitigate temperature regulation issues. Difficulty in thermoregulation is a significant threat and requires an environment that provides external means of temperature regulation. Additionally, a good night's sleep is essential for overall health. So making the sleep environment as comfortable and supportive as possible can significantly enhance our sleep quality and overall well-being.